This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Abby Lucas.
We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of creativity.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
On each episode, we examine the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
We aren't. Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and please support the show through Patreon or Substack. Thank you. Back, season 5, the season of the witch. This is Art of Darkness. I'm Kevin Kautzman with Abby Lucas.
And I am Abby Lucas.
Yes, you are. We are back. This is a core episode. Okay? This is what we do. This is the heart of the show. This is what the show is about. The dark side of creativity. And it's a new era. We think fondly of previous co-host Brad Kelly. He's got something cooking, I know for a fact. So please go and support him. You know where to find him on the internet. We are at Art of Dark Pod. You may already know Abby. Abby's been on a couple of core episodes already. She was on a couple of bangers. She was on the Bolaño episode, and more recently the Hitchcock episode. Abby, how are you?
Yes.
And also, who are you? For people,
who
is this new co-host in 90 seconds? Yeah.
In 90 seconds. So not an existential question then. My name is Abby Lucas. I am originally from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I am now living in London, have been for the last 19 years almost. I am a filmmaker. I'm also a film editor and screenwriter and just all-round lover of art.
Absolutely you are. And people can find you at Abby Lucas. It's I-E, Lucas like George. No relation. Yeah. They can find your work there. And of course, you and I have known each other for a long time. We came together through the power of theater, through the magic of theater. And
yes,
here we are.
Power and magic being very interesting words.
But okay. So you're going to get to know Abby a lot better as we go here, right? This show, the format remains the same. I'm going to do a core subject, and then Abby will do one. We are going to do, for season 5 here, we're going to do one a month. So you can anticipate a core episode every month. We have a little bonus coming up too in March. We're going to be doing a live show at a venue called Verderin on March 24th. We're going to be doing an episode on Goya. So there's going to be 12 and a half core episodes this year. I want to say thank you to, and we'll get to our subject here shortly, but I want to say thanks to everybody who has continued to support the podcast through our little sabbatical and our lineup change here. So I really appreciate everybody who continues to support us through Patreon and Substack. We're going to have a lot of good stuff this season. It's great. We've got dark rooms booked every week now, like until March. So we're going to be bringing on lots of fun guests and just more of the same Art of Darkness that everybody loves to love. All right. Who are we talking about today? We are talking about Marshall McLuhan. Abby, in the spirit of the show, as we always do, what do you know? You know nothing of my work. What do you know about Marshall McLuhan?
I don't know a hell of a lot about Marshall McLuhan, but I do know that he's Canadian and a philosopher who was interested in media and communication. I know the medium is the message, and he also had an interest in electronic communication, shrinking us into a global village. Oh, and that he appeared in Annie Hall, the Woody Allen film.
He did appear in Annie Hall. He has a wonderful cameo where, Woody Allen's character is on a date with Annie and they're in line to see a movie. And there's a bloviating professor from Columbia in front of him in line. And Woody Allen is rolling his eyes.
Breaks the fourth wall.
He breaks the fourth wall and he's able to, he brings Marshall McLuhan into the scene, and of course, it's all very meta and amusing. And Marshall McLuhan says, "You know nothing of my work. You mean to say my whole fallacy is wrong?" Which, of course, is a double negative, and it doesn't make any sense. And it's a bit of Joycean wordplay. We're going to see that Marshall McLuhan is one of these figures where once you start to dig into him and his life, there's a through line, something we say on the show that there are only like 25,000 people alive at any given time. Marshall
Hmm.
McLuhan is one of these people where once you start to investigate him, you go, oh, he was at Cambridge at this point and da da da. Um,
Good
but
school.
yeah, that is a good school. I've heard that's a good school. There's another one over there that's good. He rode for Cambridge. He's
Right.
that kind of a fellow. But
Ah.
he's got a bit of an everyman quality. I mean, he's from the prairies out here. I mean, he's from I believe he was born in Edmonton and then raised in Winnipeg, just up the road here.
Hmm.
So yeah, we're going to learn a lot about Marshall McLuhan. Just a fascinating figure, somebody I've wanted to cover for a long time, and you're going to learn a lot here today, Abby. All
Excellent.
right, yeah.
I'm
Well,
looking
that's
forward to it.
it makes sense to start a new season. Breaking the fourth wall, breaking all the walls. It makes sense to start a new season with this meditation on media and the nature of media. This guy was groundbreaking, and
Mm.
he he said he wanted to tear the hide off of Canada and rub salt in it.
Oh, wow.
He really resented the bourgeois mediocrity of Canadian provincialism, and there's a very funny moment, and of course, I'll for people who don't know this show, I'm sure Abby's going to bring in some new listeners. We will cover the entire biography of Marshall McLuhan in this episode. You will know when I start reading the biography. I have a 20-page outline, and I have two books. I've got Marshall McLuhan on the nature of media essays. One of these we're going to focus on in the After Dark for patrons. So for every episode we do, there's bonus content. You get access to it through Patreon or Substack. Patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod, Substack.com/ at Art of Dark Pod. Best way to support the show. One of those platforms. And so on the After Dark today, we're going to talk about this essay that he wrote because I always like to keep sex for the After Dark because that's what kind of
Oh, so
sells.
what happens after dark?
Yeah, that's what happens after dark, Abby. Yeah, but we have a good this an incredible essay he wrote uh, called "The Future of Sex," and he was writing this in like the set 1967. And
Okay.
you're gonna be when we talk about this on the After Dark, you're gonna think that this guy he was a prophet. He was a
Right.
prophet of the digital age. He was seeing things that other people were not seeing and anticipating things that other people could not anticipate. And one of my uh, pet theories is that nothing has changed since the late 60s. We're still
Yep.
trapped in the late 60s.
Hmm.
So the
Nostalgia.
future, yeah, nostalgia, stuck culture. But so when he was writing about the future of sex, he's writing about now in
Right.
1967. So we're gonna focus on that essay a little bit in the After
That is
Dark.
going to be interesting.
It is. It's gonna be fun. He was an adult convert to Catholicism, and this is
Hmm.
a real major part of his life. The figure who kind of initially kicked that off for him was the rather famous G.K. Chesterton. You
Hmm.
familiar with this guy?
No, I am
Uh,
not.
okay, well, there you go. You're going to
I
be.
got to learn about everybody today.
There's going to be so many names I'm going to be throwing at you. But he encountered Chesterton at Cambridge, and
Hmm.
so there are three figures who he had a sort of, if not a relationship with, influenced him. Chesterton, Ezra Pound, and Wyndham Lewis. And so in the After Dark, I'm going to give like a mini biography of all three of those guys as part of the bonus to sort of round this out. And frankly, all three of those guys are probably future subjects, especially Ezra Pound, because that guy
Yeah.
that guy was like He was put into a mental asylum. It's a whole thing. We're going to Pound Town on the After Dark. So that's going to be fun. And then the final thing that we're going to cover on the After Dark is friend of the pod, Edgar Allan Poe,
Hmm.
had a short story or has a short story. I think it's something like A Descent into the Maelstrom. Have you heard of this short story?
No.
Well, you're going to hear about it. So it's we're going to read the beginning of that and discuss that a little bit further because that was a like an arch metaphor that McLuhan used to understand our relationship with media. He this Poe short story is about these, I believe it's about these brothers who are trapped in like a almost like an underwater tornado, and they're going
Hmm.
down with their ship, and their ship is sinking, and one of their crew members dies immediately, and then one of the brothers um, tethers himself to the boat to the boat itself and ends up going down with the boat, whereas the other brother looks into the maelstrom and sees that like lighter things are floating to the surface. So he
Hmm.
ties himself to something that floats and he's able to escape the maelstrom. McLuhan thinks that's what our relationship with media is like. We have to
Right.
look at the maelstrom we have to try to see the thing for what it is. Um, it's a cliche now. The medium is the
Mm.
message, right?
Hmm.
But when you really zoom out and think about what it means, it's extraordinarily profound. I mean, uh, and of course, what does it? Well, and we're going to start. I'm going to get into the bio, but what does that mean to you? What does that phrase mean to you, Abby? The medium is
I,
the message. Hmm.
um, I guess it's about the way that you communicate something is sort of more important than what you're actually communicating. So a lot of the times people also say the impact is more important than the intention. So if you were to get into an argument with someone and like upset them, it's sometimes more important that you don't upset them rather than your intention of trying to impart something, I guess. The first thing that springs to mind to me in terms of the medium is the message. I think about the presidential debate between JFK and Nixon,
Mm-hmm.
where if people
Yep.
listened to it on old-timey radio, they thought that Nixon won the debate. But if they saw it on television, JFK won the debate because he came across as vital and handsome and, charming. And I mean, obviously, we would find out later that he was a very sick man. But it's the different ways things can be interpreted depending on how you view them.
Right. Like for example,
Literally.
I am yeah, literally. I'm crushing it if you're listening to this on Spotify, but if you're watching on YouTube, you're thinking, when is this guy going to shut up? When is it Abby's turn to do an episode? All right. But yes, and there's a lot to chew on there, right? Like imagine the movie The Godfather as
Hmm.
a radio play. It's like
Right.
unthinkable.
Yeah.
It would be completely different. Um, just on the most fundamental level, you could tell the exact same story, but the meaning would be completely different if it was rendered in a different media.
Mm.
So yeah, there's a lot to think about, and also about the way we live our lives. I mean, I'm sitting here, in my new studio, Art of Darkness Studio West, here in beautiful St. Paul, Minnesota. Uh,
Studio West.
that's right, AOD Studio West, and and I've got my TV. It's like the new hearth, right? Now 40 years ago, everybody didn't have a computer in their home. Now it's
No.
very strange if you don't have a computer in your home.
Yeah.
And it really has fundamentally changed the way that we live. And I think that one of the reasons that people are struggling with literature, struggling with the arts, struggling with theater, is that these media have not kept up with the technological progress that's happened all
Mm.
around us. It is the story of our lifetimes, and it's the water that we kind of swim in, so we don't see it. So I think what we're going to try to do today is I'm going to tell you the biography of the great Canadian Marshall McLuhan, the great prophet of media, And as we do that, I'm going to invite everybody to kind of reflect on our relationship to technology and to media. I think it's naturally going to come out of that. So the podcast is the message today. I think I'm going to call this episode Marshall McLuhan Medium Rare. I think is what we're going to call this
Nice.
episode. Yeah, fun. Um, all right, so I've got a bunch of stuff for After Dark. I've got two books that I relied on principally. This great biography, Marshall McLuhan, is excuse me, Escape into Understanding, a biography by W. Terrence Gordon, and then I have some of his essays. And I may just dip into the essays once in a while. He's one of these great kind of post-war thinkers who kind of gets away with murder. He's very aphoristic and glib, and he would McLuhan would have crushed on Twitter. Would have just been like just a generational wit
He would
on.
have been a master of the 140 characters that we used to.
Absolutely, he'd be king of the shit posters. Mm. All right, let's get into it. So, um, Marshall McLuhan was born Herbert Marshall McLuhan on July 21st, 1911 in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Abby, you ever been out to Alberta? You ever been out to Edmonton?
I have never been to Canada,
It's
sadly.
it's it's out there. It's if
It's
you can
out
look on
there. Okay.
Edmonton is like it's right on the edge of the world. I mean, it's cowboy
Wow.
country. You are yeah, out there. Um he was a man way ahead of his time. He is widely considered to be the father of media studies.
Hmm.
His work anticipated the profound transformations of the information age decades before they unfolded. He had he had this natural prophetic sensibility. It's not surprising that he was attracted to Catholicism, and we'll talk about his work with the church. The church tapped him on
Hmm.
the shoulder and said, "Hey, help us figure out what is going on here." Um, you know who I'm certain is familiar with the work of McLuhan would have been David Lynch. I'm
Oh
certain of
yeah.
it. Yeah, when you think about we are Twin Peaks respecters on this podcast. That's one thing
Very
you
much Twin Peaks respecters. I mean,
absolutely. That's something you need to know about Abby. Coming right out of the gate. Abby, I believe you introduced me to Roberto Bolaño too, didn't you? I think you
I
did
did, yes.
many
Yeah.
years ago. Yeah, see, it's all coming together. It's all coming up, Kautzman. Um, but and what is Twin Peaks about? About. I mean, it's sort of about technology. It's media about media.
Hmm.
It's a like a soap opera about a soap opera.
It's
It's like
a soap opera. It's also a detective show. You've
yeah,
got a lot of magical realism in there.
yeah. I mean, and then the third season, there's a huge through line in Twin Peaks about like electricity. Like the
Mm.
demons are somehow going through electricity. They're being transported through media. And yeah, in any case, I mean, I couldn't help myself. I was thinking about I think about Twin Peaks all the time. Some people think about
Me
the
too,
Roman
yeah.
Empire. Yeah,
Your
I think
your
about
Roman Empire is Twin Peaks.
yeah. There you go. All right, so yeah, from his early days in Canada to his groundbreaking concepts like the medium is the message and the global village, his life and ideas are as relevant today as ever. And we're going to look at all of this. He's an interesting cat because finding the darkness for this guy, it's not the most intuitive thing.
Mm.
He was his personal life was fairly um, from what I can tell, fairly benign. There's not a lot of there's not a dead parent. There's not
Yep. No
addiction as
abusive
far as I
parents.
no that as far as the thing about his parents is that they were sort of estranged from one another. They had like a
Right.
soft divorce kind of. They get a separation. His mother was the bigger personality, and his father was a bit
Mm.
of I don't like to speak poorly of people, but I mean a bit of a letdown. Like he was not
Okay.
very successful. His mother was an actress, a rather successful actress. She's one of these people who you know would go to on little tours and just give
Right.
one woman performances anywhere that would have her, right? And
Well,
she
and that's all
actually.
about the message and the medium.
Exactly, it very much is. So this performative side of his sort of character, he didn't fall that far from the tree. He would actually meet his wife, and again, we'll come to this. I always try to go chronologically, but he would meet his wife at the Pasadena Playhouse in California, where his mother
Hmm.
was um, teaching acting. So yeah, but the darkness from in McLuhan's life sort of comes from that desire to tear down bourgeois conventionality. And also like he he was one of the smartest uh cats walking the planet. You don't get into Cambridge coming out of the University of Manitoba if you're a hack
Sure.
or if you don't have it. He had it, and he really suffered um in without intellectual stimulation. He was in anguish, and I think for him, like hanging out and having a coffee with Marshall McLuhan would be, you'd have to have something to bring to the conversation. I've got a whole section here where he ends up at the University of Wisconsin. Are you familiar with the University of Wisconsin Madison, Abby? Do you know that
No,
you
I
know it
am not.
exists? Okay, it's a Big Ten.
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
assume it
okay.
exists.
It's a Big Ten school, so that's the
Okay.
conference, and there are rivals. Go Gophers, right? I'm a
Yeah.
Golden Gopher here at the University of Minnesota, and of the Badgers, we say I hate that skunk. That's what we. It's a football thing. In any event, it's a
Wow.
very good school. It
Yeah.
actually is. Madison's a good school. Jokes aside, it's a good school. But he ended up that like his first teaching post after 8 years of university in Cambridge and all the rest of this was at Madison, and he showed up like ready to we're going to talk about Joyce and we're going to talk about, and he's like, oh, they can't even write. They can't
Oh
even
no.
read. They don't even know, he's teaching the children of farmers out there. And so I think he was definitely a man out of time. And I think that uneasiness in the world must have been hard. It must have been difficult to be somebody who literally sees into the future and then has to articulate it. That's like the McLuhan challenge. But anyway, so very cool. All right, so let's get into his early life. So he was born into a family with a mix of Methodist and Baptist backgrounds. So sort of milk toast Protestants. Nothing too hot. Nobody's handling snakes.
They're
But
of the colony.
there you are. Yes, I don't know what that means, but okay. His father, and maybe you can see, and this is a new era for the show. You can bring some insights into other parts of the world. I'm very excited. Actually, who's the first subject you're covering? Tell people who you're covering next month.
The first subject I am covering will be Coco Chanel.
Awesome. That's gonna rock. And I know people are really excited for the Audrey Hepburn episode too, which is gonna be at
Yes.
the end of the year. Yeah.
That's
Mm.
yeah, that'll be I mean, hopefully not too long. I know a lot about Audrey Hepburn.
We're gonna have so much fun. All right. Okay. So his father, Herbert Ernest McLuhan, managed a real estate business that failed during World War One. Well, his mother, Elsie Naomi Hall, was just a school teacher who later pursued a career as an actress. His early years unfolded in Edmonton, Alberta, and Winnipeg, Manitoba, two Canadian cities at the turn of the 20th century that were emblematic of the nation's growth and promise. He was born on July 21st, 1911. He entered a world shaped by the boom and bust cycles of the early oil industry. So Edmonton to this day is still it's oil out there. Um,
As it is on the
Edmonton
outskirts of the world.
Indeed, it is. Yeah. Though still a frontier city in many respects, was rapidly modernizing, with its streets filling with automobiles and its skyline beginning to rise. The bustling railroad hubs and agricultural markets created a mix of rural traditions and urban aspirations. By 1915, during World War I, McLuhan's family relocated to Winnipeg, just up the road here, where his father, Herbert, struggled to reestablish his career after the collapse of the business. So here we have dad's a failure,
Hmm.
and I Marshall was not going to be a failure. I actually have something from one of his diaries here from the biography. Let me find it. This will
And
also give a little. Go ahead.
what would real estate have been like as a business in at that time? Because I imagine there weren't a lot of people buying homes, right? Like it would have been a total landlord territory back then.
I don't know. Yeah, I can't even imagine. Yeah, it's a tough business even now. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Aren't you have realtors in your family, don't you?
My both my parents were and are realtors.
Shout out to the Mr. and Mrs. Lucas, the seniors. Very good. Okay, that's a tough business. You have to be
It
good
is a
with
very
people.
tough business. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's very very competitive. So I think this will give a nice flavor of kind of where McLuhan's at. So this is 1930. He's not even 20 years old, and this is what he's writing in his diary. What do you intend to do when you grow up, Mr. McLuhan? Me. As Dr. Johnson, when at the age of 3 months, once answered Joseph Addison, outside of being a great and influential man, sir, I have not the faintest idea. I too, with him, can say, I have not the faintest idea. He is precocious.
Yes.
I mean, and there's this whole line of Anglo-centric intellectual tradition in history that that's a little alien to me. Uh,
Mhm.
so this book has been very interesting. This biography has been interesting because I've been exposed to some names and ideas that I'm just not familiar with. I did not go to Cambridge.
Uh,
I went to a little state school here. Um, Okay. In any case, Winnipeg was often called the gateway to the West, and it was one of Canada's most economically significant cities at the time, fueled by grain exports and a booming rail industry. It was a city alive with cultural and intellectual ferment, hosting a diverse immigrant population with a mix of ideas. Very interesting, sort of to think about what it must have been like to be living in a city like Winnipeg right around
mm,
World War One and sort of put ourselves into that place in that time. Really, the new world when the new world was new,
yeah.
big time, and cold. We're talking about like 6 months of winter, cold, 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 long, cold winters. Even good, like it's north of here. Okay, I am in Minnesota. It's cold here. It's
So
going to be
even
cold here for
more Arctic.
a little bit. Unfortunately. All right, so um, he attended Kelvin Technical School and he excelled academically, not surprising, immersing himself in literature and the humanities. The contrast between Winnipeg's industrial energy and the cultural conservatism of its communities may have been one of the early sparks for his fascination with change communication and the intersection of tradition and innovation. So I've got here from the biography a little bit about his one of his hobbies. When he was 17, Marshall acquired blueprints for a sailboat and enlisted friends Bill Jones and Tom Easterbrook to help build the 14-footer. Using a neighbor's garage, they set to work measuring, cutting, planing, and sanding, resorting to outside expertise only when the complexities of the spoon-shaped bow proved to be beyond them. In landlocked Winnipeg, they even managed to find 100 square feet of silk Egyptian sailcloth to ensure the lightness of the craft and improve its performance. Completed with loving attention to detail, it was loaded on a wagon and trundled to the Fort Rouge shore of the Red River. The steady, and Abby, the Red River is the only river aside from the Nile that flows north. I think that's
Oh,
true.
wow.
Yeah, I got to double check that because I don't want to talk nonsense on the pod. But
Not get our geography facts
yeah,
incorrect.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure it's the Nile and the Red River. Uh, yeah, the Nile River. There's a river in Russia. There's a few others. Of course, I was
Mhm.
raised in North Dakota, so there were, the only river that we cared about was the Red River. But yes, the Red River flows north through the U.S. and Canada, emptying into Lake Winnipeg.
My
Fun.
gosh.
I know. All right, so the steady breeze off the prairie and the welcome of Winnipeg sailors greeted them. With the launching ceremony complete, the Lark slipped into the water and sprang enough leaks to sink within minutes. But but by the time the salvage operation was over, water was already beginning to swell the new wood, sealing the seams of the hull. Nature eventually completed her work well enough to make the boat usable. Only a little corking and putty was required by way of repairs. Though an occasional leak could mar an otherwise peaceful excursion, the craft was to give years of service and countless happy hours to Marshall and his friends. He had siblings. Red, Elsie, and Herbert would also enjoy the river cruises. Sailing became a passion with Marshall, a passion with a dimension he recognized as spiritual when he reflected on it some years later from the vantage point of Cambridge. There, he would find satisfaction of a
Mm.
different kind in team rowing. And even in
Hmm.
Toronto, where he would finally settle in Toronto, more than 20 years after his day of hoisting sail under the Manitoba sky, given the chance to hear the snap of canvas catching wind to feel its tug and water slapping the hull beneath his feet, he would become a sailor again. Now, the river metaphor is critical for McLuhan. And a key text for McLuhan is Finnegan's Wake from
Right.
Joyce. Are you familiar with Finnegan's Wake, Abby?
Not overly familiar, no.
You know it exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've
I
talked about it ad nauseum on this
yes.
show. It's a critical text of modernism, and
Hmm.
it's cyclical in nature, and so it circles all the way back. And every single line is a pun and has multiple meanings. And
Mm.
you could spend a lifetime studying Finnegan's Wake. From Finnegan's Wake, McLuhan sort of drew the idea of metatextuality, like the idea that everything is interconnected with every single other thing. And you can see the metaphor of a river sort of, it's at the heart of Finnegan's Wake, and just something to pay attention to as we go along here.
Mm.
All right. Waves on the Red River never reached more than a foot and a half in height, but Marshall would identify throughout his adult life with the sailor who survived the most harrowing of adventures in Edgar
Mhm.
Allan Poe's story, A Descent into the Maelstrom. We're going to go more into
Right.
this in the After Dark, but Poe tells the story of a fisherman caught in a dreaded whirlpool of the Arctic Ocean, known as the Maelstrom, off the northwest coast of Norway. For years, the man and his two brothers shunned safe fishing grounds in favor of a more bountiful spot they could reach only by timing their run past the deadly cyclone of water, with its power to suck down boats, trees, whales, even the largest of ships. Ahead or behind the time of the slack waters, the bold brothers could be drawn to their doom in the ocean's great funnel. Twice they were stranded beyond the maelstrom and obliged to stay at anchor overnight. Becalmed on their fishing ground another time, they starved for a week before they could make for home. After years of calculated risk, they are returning to port once again when the fiercest hurricane of the century bears down on them, leaving them helpless and driven straight for the black spinning waters. One of the trio perishes at once, carried overboard with the broken mast to which he had lashed himself for safety, and the other two descend into the whirling waters with their vessel. Amid the chaos, one brother sees both horror and magnificence from his observations as to which objects descend most quickly to their destruction on the craggy rocks at the bottom of the vortex. He detects a pattern that gives him hope and the clue for a survival strategy. Unable to make his brother understand what must be done, he jumps overboard alone, lashed to the barrel that will keep him from descending further into the watery spiral. The other, preferring the apparent security of clinging to a ring bolt on their ship, perishes with it. When the
Mm.
maelstrom finally slackens, the hurricane, still raging, carries the surviving brother down the coast, where fishermen pluck him from the sea. Speechless at first from the horror he has endured, he is finally able to tell his rescuers what befell him and how he understood the way to escape, only to be greeted with disbelief. Recounting his story to the traveler, who is Poe, while showing the scene of it from the heights of a great cliff, he describes himself as broken in body and soul, and he no longer expects anyone to believe his story. Okay, beginning with a 1946 article entitled Footprints in the Sands of Crime, Marshall McLuhan would evoke the story of the maelstrom many times in his writing and teaching. It figures prominently in the preface to The Mechanical Bride, which was his first major book,
Mhm.
1951, The Mechanical Bride. Um, which, if I'm not mistaken, we'll come to it, but I think he was very interested in the emasculation of men,
Right.
how technology makes men less male, like how tech.
Even back then in 1950. Wow.
Yeah, no, I mean he was ahead of his time. Um, with an explicit statement of its place and importance in the McLuhan method. Poe's sailor saved himself. This is McLuhan.
Mm.
Poe's sailor saved himself by studying the action of the whirlpool and by cooperating with it. The present book likewise makes few attempts to attack the very considerable currents and pressures set up around us today by the mechanical agencies of the press, radio, movies, and advertising. It does attempt to set the reader at the center of the revolving picture created by these affairs, where he may observe the action that is in progress and in which everybody is involved. The words might just as well be McLuhan's when Poe's survivor says, I became obsessed with the keenest curiosity about the whirl itself. I positively felt a wish to explore its depths, even at the sacrifice I was going to make. And my principal grief was that I should never be able to tell my old companions on shore about the mysteries I should see. Like Poe's sailor, McLuhan came to the place of seeking amusement through rational detachment in surveying new environments that threatened the cultural values he cherished. And like the solitary figure in the tale, he would be greeted with skepticism for his explanation of how to escape the maelstrom of the electronic age. Okay, so good. Do we like that metaphor? I love
Love
that
it.
metaphor.
I mean, you've already got like a kid who built a boat. Like when you first said this was his hobby and him and his friends were building a boat, I'm imagining like one of those little ships in a bottle or something like this. But no, an actual vessel that they took out onto the nature. And it's like you are going to be the ultimate problem solver if at that age you're doing something that practical and coming up against the elements in it.
That's really interesting to think about, and then also but then to have the wit to make your way to Cambridge as well. You're
Mm,
sort of gonna have it all. Definitely like a natural elite. This
yeah.
guy, but his parents were. Dad was a failed realtor. Mom was a teacher.
What do you think was in his environment that sparked all of this then, or was it nature? Was it nurture?
I think it was probably his mother. I think it was the school teacher mother.
Mm,
Speaking as somebody with a,
yeah.
my mother was a school teacher. There's,
Well, and
on the
actresses
prairie.
are naturally they're naturally quite intelligent. They're quite curious about the world, about how things work, how people work, all of those sorts of things. You know, we kind of write them off as like good-looking people who recite words, but they very keenly want to know how things work.
Mm, yes. Yeah, and they also literally know how to command a room.
Mm.
Like that's what it is. What's the old joke? It's acting is the art of keeping a large group of people from coughing, something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
so that's my hunch. That, and I think there was probably
Well, and if his dad is a failure, he's probably naturally also going to be interested in masculinity and what might be emasculating.
yes, absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm gonna read a little bit. Um, let's see. This is sort of about his first girlfriend. I just want to get a little bit more from his youth. Uh, though he speculated that he would not marry until age 30, Marshall was already giving thought at 18 to the qualities of a perfect wife. Intellectual ability topped the list. Speaking
Good for
of
him.
last night, yeah, 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 okay. I'm sure that's entirely earnest. Speaking of last night, a party with dancing until 2:15 a.m.
Oh,
I
wow.
may say that I was brought to the realization more than ever that my wife must be one with a keen interest along literary lines, or at least intellectual lines. Otherwise, my friends would never suit her, nor her friends me. A shallow mate would be as intolerable as a superficial professor. Yet intellect alone could not be enough. If he felt the charms and attractions of some of his female acquaintances without understanding them, he knew nevertheless that his lifetime companion must be sincere and noble. He would use these words again to describe Marjorie Norris soon after they met in the winter of 1931. This was his first sort of great love.
Hmm.
It never they would never marry, but it was a big part of his life. I'll read a little more because I think it's going to give an idea of his background. The woman he eventually would marry was like Southern royalty. Like she was
Oh,
one of
okay.
these, Episcopalian, you know, old like debutante kind of Southern girl, ladies.
And so
Very
neither of them were Catholic at the time of their
uh,
marrying.
well, she wasn't. He was.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah. McLuhan was, and I believe he dragged her into the church. Many such
right.
cases. Yeah, based the one true faith. Um, uh, I love I actually this is a complete aside, but the new studios here where I am in downtown St. Paul, there is an old you'll see it, Abby, because you're going to be over
Hmm.
here visiting in April. But uh there's an old French church, like right where I think they may still even give mass in French periodically, right
Wow.
next door, and they have daily masses twice a day. They have a little chapel with this like a grotto, which I think is evocative of the shrine at Lourdes. It's a very interesting little church, very beautiful church. So, in any event, I occasionally attend mass there for my sins. People don't know that there's a huge French influence on the state of Minnesota. We're still
I was just about to ask. I had not
mhm.
realized.
Yeah, the state motto or whatever it is, "L'Étoile du Nord." It's the Star of the North is in French, and it was the
Hmm.
early French settlers, had a lot of influence here. Um, in any event, so uh, the Norris family, so this is his girlfriend, the Norris family were the guests of the McLuhans on the 6th of January in 1931, an evening when Marshall was puzzled by his mother's effusive behavior. But the puzzle was so quickly over. I love his mother too, by the way. She's just great. She's gonna take care of business. But the puzzle was so quickly overshadowed by the presence of Marjorie as to be forgotten. 11 days later, she was his date for a party to the home of his good chum Bill Jones. The dancing. If you live in Winnipeg in the 1930s, you're assigned a friend named Bill Jones to be your chum. The
Of
dancing was
course.
a yeah, naturally. The dancing was a
William.
pleasure. The dancing was a pleasure. Being with Marjorie was pure enchantment. A second generation Canadian, her looks bespoke the Irish blood that flowed in the veins of the Norrises and the McLuhans alike. God's own people. With her round and pleasant face, high forehead, chestnut hair, and lively brown eyes, she was as attractive in appearance as she was engaging in personality. Like Marshall, she was serious but animated, reflective but whimsical. They spoke of many subjects that evening. Marshall was delighted not only with Marjorie, but with Macaulay's gem of wisdom. The greatest use of conversational powers is to put them forth in a tete a tete. I always say that. I'm always saying that. I'm always
Yeah.
saying the greatest use of conversational powers is to put them forth in a tete-a-tete.
I love a tete-a-tete.
Who doesn't love a good tete-a-tete, Abby? Apparently, it would not always be necessary to hunt up Bill and Tom and Al for a good talk. It would be necessary, however, to remind himself of his first principle for socializing with the fair sex. The trouble was, the principle did not take into account matters of the heart. A little more here. The evening after his first date with Marjorie, Marshall was off to Knox Church with Herbert and friends Bill Jones and Tom Easterbrook. They found the music splendid, the sermon good, but entirely ravishing was Ms. Gwen Wookie. That's her name, Wookie. So he's going
Wiki.
to church and he's checking out the ladies at church.
Yeah.
All right. Um,
Churches, dances, that's where you met the ladies at the time.
that's where that we used to be. Canada used to be a proper country. If the charms and attractions of Marjorie Norris were many and complex, Marshall had recognized for some time that Gwen Wookie projected mainly sex appeal. He was
Oh
torn
gosh.
between the desire to see more of Gwen and the determination to resist in the name of his calling to scholarship. We've all had a Gwen Wookie in our
What
lives.
happened to his intellectual first principles?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm reading
Glenn
between the
Wookie.
lines here. Yeah, Gwen Wookie. One thing was clear. It looks like curtains for Babe, for I prefer either Marjorie or Gwen to her. Oh, his cup overfloweth here. In spite
Who's
of the
Babe?
dilemma, that's what I'm saying. Exactly, yeah. I mean, in spite of the dilemma, he took satisfaction in sensing that the world is not so empty of the truly noble type of girl. He invited Gwen to dances and hockey games, but soon began to find it necessary to resist her spell. If I forego the pleasure of her company for a few days more, the potency of her charms will have considerably diminished. This is a precocious kid. I have sons. I want my sons to be like this. I want them to be picky. I want them to be writing it down, Like, that is so funny. And actually very wise. It's like if I don't see
Yeah,
her for a few more days, it'll go away. This
it'll go
feeling will
away.
go away. Yeah.
It's fine.
Out of sight, out of mind. Gwen Wookie.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. A few
She's gonna
weeks
slip
later,
down the roster a little.
yeah, exactly. He's got a whole, yeah, a whole. He's got a full calendar. A few weeks later, they were out dancing again, and their time together was turning Marshall to self-assessment. I made a number of witty question mark remarks, as usual, most of which, in retrospect, seem cheap and foolish, but which, unfortunately, are past recall. This is so good. I'm going to keep going a little bit. Uh, Marshall indulged in much self scrutiny throughout his undergraduate years. He found himself lacking in any particular fine qualities. Returning from an evening out, he could feel that he had been hypocritical or worry that his friends had thought him a cheap jazz hound.
Oh no.
He believed he would never win popularity for his social affability alone, counting instead on the knowledge he would acquire to attract a circle of intellects around him. He recognized that his self consciousness could be misinterpreted as conceitedness. Such
Mm.
assessments of himself as a social creature could give way, when least expected, to even more serious intellectual self doubt. Self doubt. I often have moments when perfectly at ease that everything I am doing and thinking and hoping are hopelessly futile and childish. Least expected of all was the transformation of his self image when he fell in love with Marjorie Norris. That would still be a year and a half away as they first sailed together on the Red River on a soft summer afternoon in 1931. In the meantime, there were parties, concerts, hockey games, and theater to enjoy in the company of Gwen, Peggy. The circle of young women in his life was growing smaller, and Marjorie was occupying a larger place in it. But Marshall was still practicing his first law of socialization and getting the benefit of immunity from Cupid's shaft. Besides, Marjorie had a steady boyfriend. All right.
Oh.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, at this point in the story, he's in his third year of his BA at the University of Manitoba. He knew he wanted to get a graduate degree in English.
Mhm.
He was already studying the Oxford calendar when one of his English professors urged him to think of Cambridge because of the growing reputation of the English department. And so he's got his eye on uh, Oxbridge at this point.
Oxbridge.
Yeah, thinking about what he needs here. There's a professor named Noel Fieldhouse who was a big influence on him. And it's the sort of thing where they're going to they're going to set him up to for success, right? So,
Mm.
critical thinking was part of Marshall's mindset from the beginning of his studies. I have begun to question the right Plato has to the title of philosopher. I would concede to him the title of social idealist rather than that of a philosopher in the sense that Spinoza measures up to it. So that's where his brain is at 20 years old, right?
Wow.
I know he's taking on Plato. It's all very Reddit.
Well, it's
But
also very Cambridge because
yeah,
I mean I know some people who went to Cambridge and debating was kind of just an everyday occurrence there. Like it didn't matter
right,
what you believed in.
right.
It just would debate for fun. So
Absolutely. Who needs sex? Who needs parties?
just
We'll just
tete-a-tetes,
debate. Yeah,
tete-a-tetes and
tete-a-tete.
debates.
I love a good tete-a-tete. I don't think there's ever been a single tete-a-tete at the University of Minnesota. There's
And
the
probably
other
not the
stuff.
University of Wisconsin, which is why he
No,
went to teach there. He was like, they're
so
definitely not tete-a-tetting.
they were he brought them tete-a-tetes. That's very funny. Um, so let's read a little more because this is kind of this is going to help us understand the relative provincialism of the place that he's from and what he's emerging out of. He and his friend Tom went on a reading binge. Tom was anxious to pass on a little book by Chesterton, What's Wrong with the World. Marshall knew already that he would enjoy it. In fact, it set him on the road to one of his life's greatest turning points, his conversion to Catholicism.
Mm.
He recorded an early reaction to the work, where it is possible to detect Chesterton's formative influence on the McLuhan method of probe and juxtaposition. Quoting, it seems to me that GK's words are most valuable when he hangs them on some subject that would seem to admit of no extraneous discussion. No matter what, GK had something to say on any subject, however irrelevant, in such a manner as to make the connection at once obvious and important. Few writers, yes, I can say no other writer, has ever before been able to arouse my enthusiasm for ideas as has GK. Chesterton is responsible for a lot of converts,
Oh, really?
especially in the Anglo sphere, among Anglos. There's something I think I don't know. Well, we're gonna learn more about Chesterton as we go because I
Mm.
think Chesterton himself converted, and it's quite a thing to be. Because I'm a cradle Catholic. I'm a natural Catholic. I always think of it as it's almost like an ethnic identity for me. And the it's a hell of a thing to be an Anglo living in England to come of age and then to go, you know what? That Roman church, that's the one. That's a
And by
big
book,
deal.
like
Hmm.
I'm now curious to read this book to
Hmm.
see what it is about it that.
Well, yeah, and I believe Tolkien was a Catholic as well, and obviously, well, in any event,
Mm.
The Catholicism is going to play a huge role in this, and you really can't understand him as a thinker without understanding that conversion. So it's important for us to sort of cover. Um, Marshall excelled at essay writing, but often disappointed himself in exam results. He set and followed review schedules calling for up to 150 hours of study, with the result that he was frequently overprepared. He vowed to recall forever one such occasion with fasting and mourning, commenting wryly that it had given him the material to write How to Lose a Scholarship. All one need do is to master the work so completely that you are unable to tell the examiners about it in the 2 hours at your disposal. It helps to leave out one of the four required questions. So he's saying, I was so well prepared that I covered everything so thoroughly that I left out one of the questions. Like, it was like a nerd alert.
I mean,
Like,
they went. I was struck by they went on a reading binge.
yeah, that's who we're up against here.
Yeah.
I I'm going to cover Schopenhauer later this season. I'm excited.
Hmm.
I have my little philosophy degree here, and it just it's shocking how outclassed you can be by somebody. And I certainly feel a little outclassed by McLuhan, which is fine. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah.
I didn't go to Cambridge.
Neither did
Um,
I.
but I love learning about I love people who think about thinking.
Mm.
Like we're gonna get together and think about what it means to and then also then to apply to spend X number of years, decades reading every single thing you can get your hands on, and then to turn your attention to comic books. And
Right.
like he wrote academically on comic books. Nobody was doing that. He's the guy who's like, this is important. This is popular media. What does it mean that
Mm.
this is what people are consuming? What are the messages embedded inside the form itself? What are we very? We'll read some
Yeah,
of his. Mhm.
what bits of difference can you get from seeing the image rather than just imagining it with the prose? I,
Exactly. Yes. Um, So let's see here. Such times led him to reflect on the university system, quoting, "At a Manitoba examination, it is well nigh impossible to get a high mark if one has a subject up properly. By that I mean if the best outside sources have been consulted. A richly stored mind is anything but an asset in a 2 hour examination." In the private form of his diary, he advocated small classes, no exams, and mandatory summer reading, identifying at the same time the chief shortcoming of his undergraduate education. The best and most formative years of an English student's life are spent in examining the peaks of English literature. There is no laboring up the slope to those peaks. They are conveniently sawed off and laid before the student, and in 99% of the cases, at least there is not the slightest appreciation gained of the great intellectual and artistic genius of the author. Marshall was moving toward an answer to his own question when he had wondered what I should like to be or where I should like to climb to. England beckoned. All right, so
hmm.
uh, he and his buddy Tom go over to England, and this is what he had to say about this. This is going to be a fun little anecdote. You're going to like this. Here I'm quoting him. "How I long to get across to that wee island to talk with the living, to talk with the living, to visit, read, absorb, and revere the past, places, the books, the spirit of the great past, and the aspirations for the future." That's what I'm going to say when I land over there for my play, when I get into
Oh,
customs. Hmm.
because yeah, that's how I describe.
Everybody come and hang out in London. We're going to have a lot of fun. Go to
Everybody come and hang
moderationplay.com.
out in London.
Abby is involved with the play too. She does the
Mhm.
video. She's going to be doing the video work for that play. So she's Knox Harrington, the video artist.
Yes,
Uh,
a completely different medium in the play sphere.
yeah, it's going to be fun. Yeah, really though, come to the show. Moderationplay.com. We gotta put butts in seats. I promise it's going to be good. And I do mention McLuhan in my play. Oh,
Yes.
Moderation got published, so you can
Yeah, I saw
go
that.
and buy a
Congratulations.
copy. Thank you. The Great Broadway Play Publishing. My friends over there, they finally were able to put it out, and you can go and order it now. Just look up
Fantastic.
Moderation Broadway
In an
Play
old-timey
Publishing.
book.
Yeah, and I don't even have my author copy or my playwright copies yet. So go and order it now because you might get a version that has some like errors and things, and then later it'll be worth something. Because I'm in any event, really really excited and yeah, moderationplay.com. Come and hang out. It's going to be the month of March. It's going to be March into April 2025, and it's going to be the premiere. And when I land at Heathrow, I'm going to say how I long to get across to that wee island to talk with the living, to visit. Yeah. Um, but this is fun. So he and his buddy Tom go over to England in 1932. The trip began inauspiciously when the boys arrived in Montreal after a 3 day train trip and were promptly fleeced. They fell
I
in with a
forget
man.
how big America is. Three
It's
day
a
train trip.
that's a long that to Montreal. That's a long train ride. I wonder what that
Mm.
route was like. Probably going 30, 40 miles an hour. Yeah. So they fell in with a man who introduced himself as the son of an English nobleman. Believing his tangled story of misfortune, they agreed to lend him money from the
Oh
little they had
no.
on the assurance that his father would repay them when they arrived in England. If the
Aristocracy
innocents,
grift.
I love it. Um, so yeah, if the innocents had second thoughts, it was too late. They had taken working passage on a cattle boat, and it was time to sail. The heavy seas of the North Atlantic added to their misery of attending to the animals, and the
Outrage.
living hell of their days and nights aboard the steamer was enough to put every thought but survival out of their minds. But the young men put the gut wrenching crossing behind them the minute they stepped ashore in England. The pages of Macaulay and Johnson, Thackeray and Shakespeare came alive for Marshall. He and Tom bought a pair of old bicycles, and for 3 months they toured the country, feasting on the civilizing influence of cultural monuments and the visible roots of England's traditions, breathing an atmosphere that could never have been conjured in the imaginations of two boys from the Canadian prairies. They had so little money that they took turns going into sites charging admission, but it didn't matter. Extraordinary measures of economy were required for food, broken crackers becoming a staple item. Against all odds, they did locate the father of the fellow who had benefited from their generosity in
Wow.
Montreal. He honored his son's debt and cursed him in their presence.
Oh my
Marshall's head
gosh.
was teeming with more images than he could sort out as the time drew near to return home, but he was clear on one thought. Before long, he would be back in England as a graduate student. The incentive to finish his BA with distinguished results was now stronger than ever and sustained Marshall throughout the final year. He graduated in the spring of 1933, winning the University Gold Medal in Arts and Sciences. His English professors wanted him to do graduate work in English, while his history and philosophy professors hoped that he would stay on to work with them. It was a season of triumph, and it was a season of love. That's how that little section ends
Mm,
here in the book. And so he's
nice.
having a love affair here with Marjorie. Uh
Marjorie
so
survived the trip to England.
yep, yep. Um very very interesting. I like that he's just like me for real. Like he studied history and philosophy as an undergrad, and then English as well, and then he merged all of those things together to create his own sort of
Mm,
approach to media.
to media.
Um, let's read a little bit about this relationship because this feels pertinent. Um, let's see. I want to make sure I get everything here. When Marshall had returned from England in the fall of 1932, he was powerfully attracted to Marjorie, but reacted negatively at first to the face of Elsie's, his mother, perpetual
Mm.
adulation and encouragement. To
Oh,
him, that could put you off if your mom's like, "That's the one.
that's the one.
She's the one.
She's like,
She's the
she
one."
knows that boy. She is like, this
Yeah.
girl is the one to the T, but you're gonna rebel
Mm,
against me.
hmm Vanity exacted its toll and kept him from becoming her suitor. If, as he suspected, she was not really enthusiastic toward her steady Jimmy Monroe, Jimmy
Oh,
Monroe,
Jimmy.
this was small consolation, much less encouragement. Jimmy was a presence so disagreeable to Marshall that he could scarcely enjoy Marjorie's company, even when they were alone. When they went out as a foursome with Marjorie as Jimmy's date, Marshall was a seething cauldron of unutterable misery.
Oh
How
my
do you really
gosh.
feel? Then Marjorie invited Marshall to a dance, and all the tender of my soul was ablaze. Suddenly, they were dating regularly, skating, attending movies and plays. When they were apart, Marshall was love's fool, absorbed in writing poems, or as we say on the show, poems, and dreaming
Poems.
away the hours he had always hoarded for reading and study. Yeah. Marshall would say of Marjorie, the moment you meet her, you are aware of the presence of one than whom Shakespeare conceived nothing superior.
Wow.
It was head over heels. Knowing her, he felt, was an education such as neither home nor my reading could ever have supplied. Under her influence, his behavior was changing. The shyness and fearfulness that isolated him from people, the overbearing ways and confidence that masked his fears began to disappear. These transformations were underway as soon as he stopped restraining the love he felt for Marjorie, as soon as he saw his own one sidedness and harshness in the mirror of her feminine wholeness and sympathy. His independent spirit had always made him a detached observer, seeking to understand. At the same time, it created a powerful desire for the intimacy of someone who could understand him. Marjorie did. He was euphoric enough to begin thinking about marriage, but was troubled immediately by the obstacles he saw. Marjorie was a medical student, committed like him to the years of study and training ahead. Misguided ambition on the part of Marjorie's mother had steered her in this direction. But there was an even more serious problem. Marjorie was 2 years his senior. With his own
Mm.
prospects for finding a position after graduate studies at least 4 years away, it seemed like a cruel and hopeless situation to the ardent Marshall. He spoke in his diary of the absolute certainty that she shall never be my wife. Influenced perhaps by the material expectations that so possessed Elsie, and echoing worries he had expressed about providing for a wife and family well before Marjorie had come on the scene, Marshall saw no answer as he asked himself how he could build his future plans and put all his hopes in one who should even now be in a beautiful home of her own. He thought of looking for a job, but the Depression, you've got to remember it's like the 1930s,
Mm.
put it out of the question. Besides, he knew that an early marriage would amount to stunting both their lives. There was nothing to do but regret that he was not 4 years older. Yet, in moments when the sheer force of love overwhelmed him, regret and worry and doubt were banished. Months before a particular heady April evening, Marshall had written of his gratitude to Marjorie for her understanding, her thoughtfulness, and her selflessness, confidently intending to read his thanks aloud to her when they were man and wife. So, okay, they would never, realize this in a marriage, but he was, yeah, this is like a huge part of his biography was this first relationship.
Yeah.
Um, and it was not to be. Let's see here. He's writing at this point, he writes for an article for the Manitoban on George Meredith as a feminist. And here's what he wrote. He typifies the two things which really make the Victorian age itself: the cheapness and narrowness of its conscious formulae, the richness and humanity of its unconscious tradition. While the petty conscious Meredith was fretting about the benevolent enslavement of women by men and urging uniform education of both sexes, the great unconscious Meredith was painting women for what they are: the rulers of the world.
Wow.
That's where this kid's brain is. Like, I'm just gonna dash off a piece. He was thinking about sex and gender a
Mm.
lot and young. Like that's another big part
Yeah.
of his work.
Uh,
Mhm.
Coming from a family with a big personality mother, going after women that are 2 years older than him.
Mhm. Yeah, so he's working on his master's thesis, dealing with this person Meredith as a poet and dramatic novelist, and he got his master's degree in 1934. And the next chapter in this fine biography is called "England's Green and Pleasant Land." I'm just gonna lie back and think of England here. Uh,
Yeah. Cambridge is very pretty. It's a
it's
very pretty
beautiful.
town.
Yeah, I mean, Oxford too. I've never been to Cambridge, but
Mm.
Oxford is beautiful. Yeah, beautiful, stunning.
Both are very beautiful.
Cambridge isn't that far from London, is it? It's like an hour, right?
On the train, maybe like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours.
That
Yeah.
yeah, that wee island.
That wee island. It is very small.
Mhm. Yeah, it really is. So this is from his diary, 1935. Rise regularly at 8. How I love the reappearance of green. How much green there is in England. It's true. It's a beautiful little country.
Yeah, I would have thought of Canada as quite green, is it not?
Not the
No.
prairies. No,
Okay,
I mean, you're
right.
talking about the windswept. I mean, you're talking about, you've seen the movie Fargo? It's
Yes.
north of Fargo.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, for those not watching, she just winced. Abby just winced visibly. Um, so here we are. So he makes it to Cambridge here. I'm gonna get back to my outline.
Hmm.
What page am I on? I assure you I'm not far enough.
Still page
Yeah,
one.
I'm on page 4 of 25.
Wow.
So yeah, let's
He
let's
lived a
try to
grand
move.
life.
Oh yeah, he did. He had a very very rich full life, and his children are still around. I believe that I think his son Eric, kind of continues the
Mm.
the work, um, and yeah, very cool. Okay, the center that he founded in Toronto only closed in 2023.
Oh my gosh.
And the woman who would be his wife lived to 2008. So this guy's a lot. You think about maybe 1911, it feels like a long way away, but it's not that far away.
Mm.
Okay, so let's get him to Cambridge. In 1934, Marshall McLuhan left the familiar confines of Winnipeg for the hallowed halls of Trinity Hall, Cambridge. The move marked a turning point in his intellectual and personal development. Cambridge was, at the time, one of the world's leading centers of scholarship. I think it still is.
Still is, yeah.
Yeah, particularly in the humanities. The university boasted an intellectual atmosphere steeped in tradition, yet brimming with modernist fervor, which, of course, would have been ideal for someone like
Mm.
McLuhan. At Cambridge, he encountered two towering figures in literary criticism and philosophy, I.A. Richards and F.R. Leavis, or Leavis, Leavis. Richards was a pioneer of the new criticism and emphasized close reading and the importance of understanding the interaction between language, thought, and emotion in texts. This approach resonated with McLuhan and laid the groundwork for his analysis of media. So we're going to
Mm.
apply Cambridge level critical theory criticism that we apply to something like Ulysses or a poem. We're going to apply that to the Peanuts comic.
Right.
Like we're going to apply that to television and not what's on the television. We're going to apply that level of rigor and thinking to the idea of television itself.
How we use the television.
Right. Or how the television uses us.
Ah,
Yeah, right. Yeah. Um, uh, Levis, on the other hand, stressed the moral and cultural responsibilities of literature, a perspective that dovetailed with McLuhan's eventual view of media as a force shaping society's ethical and intellectual fabric. Cambridge also introduced McLuhan to the triwium. Are you familiar with the triwium?
I am not familiar with the triwium.
Well,
What is
it's
the triwium?
the triwium is grammar, rhetoric, and logic.
Okay.
I know you're familiar with grammar.
Yes.
And
And
logic.
logic.
That's really funny. You know what? I don't have anything more to say about that. But it's the triwium,
But
people,
also rhetoric.
and rhetoric. Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really funny. Which would become central to his. We're having an excellent tete-a-tete here. It would become central to his intellectual framework. Immersed in the study of medieval and Renaissance literature, McLuhan found himself drawn to the idea that different modes of communication had historically shaped human consciousness and culture. This would be central to his work on media theory. And I bookmarked this earlier because I think this is really interesting. Back in the biography. Though difficult to detect in McLuhan's publications, the connection between his faith and his media studies emerges clearly in his correspondence and his private papers. It proves to be wholly unlike the bizarre mix confected by Jonathan Miller in his critical study, McLuhan, of a convert's Catholic piety and the transmuted legacy of severe agrarian partialities from F.R. Leavis. McLuhan's own account from a letter written in 1973 runs as follows. At one time, when I was first becoming interested in the Catholic Church, I studied the entire work of G.K. Chesterton and the entire group from the Pre-Raphaelites and Cardinal Newman through to Christopher Dawson and Eric Gill. All of this really is involved in my media study, but doesn't appear at all. McLuhan expanded on the faith technology connection at both the personal and historical level. I even became a Catholic by studying the Renaissance. I mean that my historical studies were all on that period, and I became aware that the church had been destroyed or dismembered at that time by this crazy accident of technology. He's talking about print. The
Mm.
whole of medieval culture was oral because they read everything aloud to themselves. They could not see the text until they said it, like shorthand today. Luther and the first Protestants were all still schoolmen. They carried over the scholastic disputation into the new visual culture. They were still oral men, but they were using the new technique of printing to strengthen and intensify their differences with Rome and with one another. So McLuhan goes so far as to say, and I don't think it's necessarily original, or even that extreme to think that like the Protestant Reformation was a technological revolution as much as anything else, and that's then when you understand his Catholicism, that is of the most pressing concern. Like if you truly believe in the church and you believe that the Reformation was or the Protestant yeah, the Reformation was a disaster, like and you can connect that to technology itself, then it behooves you to understand like the importance of technology on our lives. Like if it's a matter of souls, like yeah, and of course we know we can't put that genie back in the bottle. We've
Mm.
just lived through in our own lives. We've just lived through a revolution akin to the printing press. We're doing it right now. We're doing an internet right now,
We're
Abby.
doing it right now. Yeah, I mean, the thought of what it must have been like to go from not reading and not really writing to having this thing where you could get a mass amount of information out to people and they're now consuming in a different way, they're thinking in a different way. It's multiple people's voices rather than just like one oral person who is imparting the stories to them. And then now we've got these in our pockets and we can broadcast whatever we want to as many people who are as willing to listen to us.
It's
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 crazy.
crazy. And it's indistinguishable from magic. If you grabbed someone like McLuhan, born in 1911, and dumped them in any major city, it would seem like magic to them.
Hmm.
It's really, really something to unpack. Cool, fun. We're doing an internet right now. Speaking of the internet, everybody, you can find us at artofdarkpod.com. You know where to find us. We're gonna keep doing this show. We got lots of exciting episodes this year. I cannot wait to hear you do your first episode next month, Abby. Do you have your books? Do you have your Chanel books?
I'm excited. Yes, I have a Chanel book that I am reading at the moment, and it's been illuminating. I did know a little bit about Mademoiselle beforehand, but now well, what I have learned is she's an unreliable narrator. So I don't know
Ah,
if what I know is true.
that's the best kind of narrator is the unreliable kind. Abby, I'm going to stand up and get myself a little bit of water here. Can
Sure.
you, while I do that, do you want to tell people a little bit about what you're doing creatively too in your
Okay.
filmmaking? Just give me 90 seconds.
All right. At the moment, I have just finished off a film called Reconsolidation, which kind of explores a little bit the magic of sci-fi in a way. Like sci-fi, I guess, is us trying to find a scientific way to describe things that are magical. And Reconsolidation is a short film about a man who is going through a very intense grieving process for a friend of his that died in a car accident that the main character Blake may or may not have been responsible for. And in his grief, he seeks out an alternative method of therapy, which is based on a real therapy that is offered to PTSD sufferers, called reconsolidation therapy. And through the therapy, he is able to revisit the memory of his friend's death through his dreams, and he tries to rewrite the narrative of that death. And because we shouldn't be messing with the past or the present or the future in these ways that are ungodly, I guess, uh, things go terribly wrong for him.
Very cool. And people can find you at abbylucas.com.
At abbylucas.com.
Awesome. And we've got a collaboration we're going to work on later this year. We
Yes,
we
we do.
finished Act 1 of Killdozer the musical.
Yep.
we just need
We
music
just
now.
need we need to
We need
know
musicians.
how to form words into rhythmical rhyming.
Yeah, we are not musicians. Yeah. If anybody knows a musician who wants to work on Killdozer the musical, you can
Yes.
email us at artofdarkpod@gmail.com. I'm going to double
We
down
we
to
have a vibe. Uh we
we've got
just
we've got a
need
60-page vibe. We just need somebody to put the music
we
in the
just need
musical.
rhyming couplets.
It- so easy. And can you imagine how much fun it would come and have a tete-a-tete with us? I
We can
promise we're we're
tete-a-tete on it
we're
forever.
we're vaccinated. um, no, really, and everybody keep an eye out for what Brad is going to do. Because I think it might be called Method and Madness or something like this.
Yeah,
I know
I
he's
loved the
teasing it.
imagery of
Hmm.
the little teaser that he put out
Yeah,
on Twitter.
yeah, and Brad, is I mean, bulk of the series, dude. He's always going to be Art of Darkness family, and hopefully we can get him back on the pod at some point. And I can't say enough about how um, cool it's been to do this show with that dude
Mm.
for all these years, and also, but how happy I am to have you on board, Abby. This is
Oh.
I learned so much from doing this show, and I stressed out about it a little too much. Like I need to calm down. Like it stresses me out because I care,
Yeah.
and I put in a lot of work, to these core episodes especially, but it's always worth it. And I would do it if nobody listened, to be honest, which is sad, but I really would. Like I love because I have this goofy intellectual background where you go and you get a degree in history and philosophy, and then there aren't historian jobs, there aren't philosopher jobs, like nobody's, But it's a thing that I love and it's a passion. And I mentioned my mother was a teacher, and my
Hmm.
stepfather's. I come from a line of teachers, and I consider this to be it's kind of a type of teaching.
Yeah,
Um,
I
yeah.
I I mean I was one of those rare people that liked school. And
Whoa.
I think one of the sad things about being an adult is how little sort of formal education you have that like unless you're seeking it out through reading things or I guess watching documentaries or just looking for the information yourself that there are very aside from life lessons there are very few lessons that you are encountering in your life and
Yeah.
it doing the two episodes that I did uh was really invigorating for me to learn a little bit more about some people that I knew a bit about.
Yeah. There's always surprises. You're
Mm.
never, you're never going to go, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think the show lives in those little pockets of surprise. Like McLuhan as this hopeless romantic is
Yeah.
such an interesting thing. McLuhan as a Catholic, an adult convert to Catholicism who blamed the Reformation on print, like, and then
Mm.
thought about that for 10,000 hours. And like, what an intriguing way to spend your days. And yeah, and just one more time, thanks to everybody who supports the pod. Keep supporting us. Patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod. That's the best place to go. And anybody who, if you fell overboard during this transition, you're welcome back. Come on back, because we're gonna
Come
have a
on
really
back.
fun. Come on back. We're gonna have a really fun after dark, and it's gonna be a really really good time. We're gonna talk about Chesterton. We're gonna go to Pound Town. We're gonna talk more about the Maelstrom. But really, these episodes that we
Stare into
do.
that maelstrom.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Look right directly at the podcast, and fear not. But really, your support, it makes all the difference. We have to have it because you know Abby and I are both busy adults. We've got a lot going on, and the only way that we're able to continue putting in time and effort into a show like this is because there's actually a little bit of money on the table, and it makes a huge difference. So thank you, everybody. And also come and hang out with us. We're easy to find. I mean, the title or the opening of the show is Very Online Writers. We're easy to find. You can find us on Twitter at Art of Dark Pod, and then also Discord is sort of the place to go. We have artofdarkpod.com/Discord. Get in there, behave yourself, and come and hang out with the fellow weirdos who listen to Art of Darkness. All right, that was a nice little break. I had to take a little break there. All right, okay, so Cambridge, The broader cultural milieu of the 1930s Cambridge also influenced McLuhan. This was an era of significant intellectual upheaval as modernist ideas in art, literature, and science were challenging established norms. The university was a hub for debates on everything from literary criticism to quantum mechanics, and McLuhan absorbed these discussions eagerly, often drawing connections between seemingly disparate fields. It was at Cambridge that McLuhan first encountered the work of friend of the pod, James Joyce, and
Mm.
Wyndham Lewis, two authors who would profoundly shape his thinking. Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, with its dense, elusive style and exploration of language's transforming power, became a touchstone for McLuhan's later ideas about media as extensions of human perception. Lewis's biting critiques of modernity and his emphasis on visual culture provided another key influence. And he would have a real relationship with Wyndham Lewis that would end kind of sourly. Lewis was a bit of a prickly pear.
Hmm.
Uh, I might talk a little more about that a little bit later. So I have the header here is rowing at Cambridge. All right. So fancy. His time at the University of Cambridge introduced him to the structured world of collegiate rowing. Have you ever rowed, Abby? You ever done anything like that?
Roads. I've canoed. I, is it the
Yeah.
same?
No, I think we're talking about that where they
Wait, it's the
row like
team.
Olympic rowing, like the
Yeah.
Winklevi rowing.
Okay. I
Yeah.
have I have canoed with another person, which is like a miniature form of rowing, and I have rowing machines.
You've I Okay. Okay, I
These are my
understand.
experiences with rowing. But I
Where I lived in Texas. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the Henley rowing competition between the Oxbridge students is very famous.
It's a big deal, right? Every year,
Mm.
if who wins, Oxford or Cambridge, it's a very
Mm.
important rivalry. It's
They've
like
got
Harvard
they've got
Yale
the
football.
rowing rugby and they've got the rowing rivalry and the rugby rivalry.
Rowing, rugby,
Yeah.
rugburns.
I
Um,
very rich people activities
it,
in the
it
United
it does.
Kingdom.
Yeah. It seems that way, doesn't it? Where I lived at Texas in Austin, the university facilities for rowing were right there, and
Okay, because you've got
it
that big
looks
river.
exhausting. Yeah, this was like Lake Austin. Yeah, it
Yeah,
looks
I'm sure it's great exercise.
it looks really, really, really tiresome. It
Yeah.
looks like yeah. I think I could be the what is it? The coxswain? Is that the person who sits in the back
Oh,
and
cock swin
coxswain?
coxswain.
I could be that person in the
The
back
guy at
barking.
the
Is what
back
I'm
who's
saying.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
the little guy in the back. It's probably be pretty. Row harder. That's all you do.
Rohan.
Row harder. Row harder. All right. So so he takes up rowing, and of course, it has a long tradition at Cambridge, requiring discipline, teamwork, and endurance. And he was a member of one of their rowing crews. He embraced the rigors of early morning practices on the River Cam, where the rowers' synchronized movements symbolized the balance between individual effort and collective harmony. Rowing at Cambridge offered McLuhan a unique vantage point on the interplay of physical exertion, rhythmic motion, and mental focus. The long hours spent gliding across the water cultivated his ability to perceive patterns and rhythms, skills that would later inform his analytical approach to media. The meditative quality of rowing, combined with the camaraderie of his fellow crew members, mirrored the communal experiences McLuhan would later attribute to oral cultures in his work. These experiences on the Red River, of course, we recall, flows northward and which he sailed on, and the River Cam shaped McLuhan's lifelong appreciation for the interconnectedness of environments, systems, and human activity. Uh, Now, I mentioned Finnegan's Wake. I have a whole section here called "The River in Finnegan's Wake," uh, and I'm gonna read. I'm gonna read from the end of Finnegan's Wake here. Okay, uh, famously the most unreadable book, the most difficult book.
From
I'm going
me
to
as
read.
spoilers for the most unreadable book.
Listen, there are 626 pages ahead of this page, okay? But I'm just gonna read. I'm gonna read a page and a half of the end of Finnegan's Wake, okay?
Okay.
Yes, you're changing, son husband, and you're turning. I can feel you for a daughter wife from the hills again. Imla Maya, and she is coming, swimming in my hind moist. Divil taking on me tail. Just a whisk, brisk, sly, spry, spink, spank, sprint of a thing there, Zomer, saltering. Saltarella, come to her own. I pity your old self I was used to. Now a younger's there. Try not to part. Be happy, dear ones. May I be wrong, for she'll be sweet for you as I was sweet when I came down out of me mother. My great blue bedroom, the air so quiet, scarce a cloud, in peace and silence. I could have stayed up there for always only. It's something fails us. First we feel, then we fall, and let her reign now if she likes, gently or strongly as she likes. Anyway, let her reign, for my time is come. I done me best when I was let, thinking always if I go, all goes. 100 cares, a tithe of troubles, and is there one who understands me? One in 1,000 of years of the nights. All me life I have been lived among them, but now they are becoming loathed to me. And I am loathing their little warm tricks, and loathing their mean cozy turns, and all the greedy gushes out through their small souls, and all the lazy leaks down over their brash bodies. How small it's all, and me letting on to meself always, and lilting on all the time. I thought you were all glittering with the noblest of carriage. You're only a bumpkin. I thought you the great in all things, in guilt and in glory, but you're a puny home. My people were not their sort out beyond there, so far as I can. For all the bold and bad and bleary they are blamed, the sea hags. No, nor for all our wild dances in all their wild din. I can seen myself among them. A la nu, a la nuivia pulchrabelled. How she was handsome, the wild Amazia, when she would seize to my other breast. And what is she weird, haughty Niluna, that she will snatch from my ownest hair? For 'tis they are the stormies, ho hang, hang ho, and the clash of our cries till we spring to be free. Aravuls, they say, never heed of your name, but I'm loathing them that's here and all I loathe. Loonly in me loneness. For all their faults I am passing out. Oh, bitter ending. I'll slip away before they're up. They'll never see, nor know, nor miss me. And it's old and old. It's sad and old. It's sad and weary. I go back to you, my cold father, my cold, mad father, my cold, mad, fiery father, till the near sight of the mere size of him, the moils and moils of it, moan and moaning makes me sea salt sick, and I rush my only into your arms. I see them rising. Save me from those terrible prongs. Two more, one, two more men's more. So, aval, aval. My leaves have drifted from me, all, but one clings still. I'll bear it on me to remind me of Lif. So soft this morning ours. Yes, carry me along, Tatty, like you done through the toy fair. If I seen him bearing down on me now under white spread wings like he'd come from archangels, I sink, I die down over his feet, humbly dumbly only to wash up. Yes, Tid, that's where first we pass through the grass, behush the bush, to wish a gull, gulls. Far calls coming, far, end here, us, then, fin, again, take bus of bus of thee, memora me, till thousand thee lips the keys to, given away alone, alas, a loved along thee.
Yeah.
That's the end. And then it starts, yeah, and then that's a page and a half of that shit. It's 600 and some pages, and then it starts over again along the. So let me do it one more time. So it's, the keys to given, away, alone, a last, a loved, along thee. Oh, And now my mouse doesn't want to have any of this. Oh no. But it starts over again. And oh yeah, my mouse died. Hang on.
Ooh.
Oh, Finnegan's Wake. What on earth?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Rather famously, right? I've got a backup mouse here, but let me just refresh it so I can get the beginning because it's important to the whole metaphor that I'm crafting here, right? Like, and then this is how it starts. At the beginning of the sentence, it starts in the middle of the sentence. River run past Eve and Adams, from swerve of shore to bend of bay, brings us by a commodious vicus of recirculation back to Howth Castle and environs. So it's about the river.
Hmm.
And the metaphor of the book is that the book itself is a river and the language is a river. And there's no end. There's no beginning. There's
Right.
no end. There's only the stream of
The flow
the
and
flow of experience and of life and all of it. Yeah. So I just think it's interesting that. Well, okay, I'm gonna get back to my outline here, right? The river becomes a central metaphor for the novel's structure and themes. Rivers are continuous yet ever changing. They embody the flux of time, history, and language. For Joyce, the river represents the life cycle: birth, death,
mm,
renewal, mirroring the course of human existence. The motif of the river also reflects a parody of the Catholic Mass. The river's flow, its constant renewal and return, parallels of the liturgical rhythm of the Mass, which reenacts the sacrifice and resurrection of Christ in a cyclical manner. The Mass concludes with the words, Ite missa est, this Mass is ended, signifying a return to the world, much like Finnegan's Wake ends by returning to its beginning. Joyce's conclusion parodies this liturgical finality by creating a text that never truly ends. It's a loop, a flow that continually renews itself like a river returning to its source. There's something about modernism and that perpetuity, the idea that there's a like a continuity of things. I
hmm
can't quite I can't quite put my finger on what I mean here. But this also relates to technology. You know, the great biography of Steve Jobs that
hmm
the biographer, his name escapes me. I think it might be Isaacson. Um, have you read that, Abby?
I haven't read it.
Yeah, Steve Jobs, the Apple devices, they don't have off buttons.
Right.
Do you know? Like,
Yeah.
do you know
I
how
am just, I
bold
am
that
like
is?
staring at some now, and no, they don't have off
They don't.
buttons.
They don't really have off buttons. You're not supposed to turn it off. And I as a young person in North Dakota, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, I knew that the internet was like kind of a new god, like a new
Mm.
sort of demigod or like a new creature, some sort of thing. Not to be sacrilegious, but I mean, it really is an idol. And I could see it very early. I mean, I saw what it was becoming in 1995, 1990. By 1998, it was clear as day. What was your relationship to the internet when you were out in New Zealand, Abby? Were you online
Um,
very young?
I I remember getting online maybe around, I was probably about 14. And I like my early relationship with it was I almost treated it like it was a book that I had picked up. Like I'd go to websites that I liked, and because it was so expensive per hour, like my parents would set an egg timer and I was only allowed to be on there for an hour because that was going to cost $5 or whatever it was. And I would go to websites that I liked and I would print them out and then I would read the information from them like a book later on because it
That's
was too
adorable.
expensive to stay on the internet.
Mm.
And then obviously it transformed as you started to be able to communicate more with people. It was like the letter writing became email, the I was definitely instant messaging more than text messaging, and it opened up to this global thing. But my very first interactions with it were like it was a magazine or a book that I could print out this information and take.
Yeah.
And I printed out scripts. I found scripts of TV shows that I liked and I printed them out and I put them in little clear files and I carried them around and read them.
No, like Seinfeld and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's very endearing. The Seinfeld scripts are amazing, by the way. If you want to read, like they leap from the page. It's
Mm.
crazy how good they are. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, we're old. You're listening to a
We are
couple of
old, yeah.
olds. You're listening to a couple of olds. I just went through a
We
crisis
had
here.
the dial-up
Hmm.
sounds that you'd
Oh
have
yeah.
to endure for a minute or so before it would connect. Yep.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. I used a rotary phone.
I did as well. Yeah.
Oh boy. I had a crisis that occurs in every sports fan's life that I wasn't aware of.
Okay, what's that?
I will warn my sons of this. Um, you in your 20s, you begin to realize you're older than the players.
Oh,
In
right,
your
that one.
40s, you begin to realize you're older than the coaches.
Oh,
That is a trip. Like we've got the Vikings have a very probably the biggest regular season game in the history of the NFL is being played tonight against the Lions of Detroit at Detroit. And I'm older than the coach. And
damn.
and it's a kids game. They're playing a kids game. In any event, you know what? You know how we sell the pod though is we have some wisdom. Collectively between
Yes.
the two of us, we have some
Yeah.
wisdom. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I
So
haven't read Finnegan's Wake, but
sure,
I have
right, right,
some
right. But
wisdom somewhere.
you've heard the end of Finnegan's Wake, thanks to
I've
Kevin.
heard the
It's
end.
actually
Yeah.
it's
It's
actually
it's
incredible.
it's
Like
about a river.
it is about a. It's also literally about like being made pregnant. That at the
Mm.
end there, he's writing about it's multiple things. Um, very very wild. Okay, let's get back to the McLuhan outline here. I hope everybody's having a good time. I love doing these core episodes. All right, so he drew extensively from Finnegan's Wake in formulating his ideas about media and communication. He viewed the river motif as a metaphor for the constant flow of information and the interplay of media environments. In McLuhan's framework, media are rivers, dynamic, transformative, and cyclical, always carrying human culture forward while reshaping it in the process. The humor of my whole fallacy is wrong. Okay, so uh, in the Woody Allen in Annie Hall, that's the joke. He says, you know nothing of my work. You it's something like you think my whole fallacy is wrong, or you mean my whole fallacy is wrong. It's a double
Mm.
negative. It's a dick joke because it's got fallacy, right? It's
Fallacy.
yeah, okay. But that's the level that this guy's playing on. And I'm going to talk. I'll come to it when he does the business with Woody Allen. Very funny. Um, but yeah, so I mean, he was heavily influenced by Finnegan's Wake. Finnegan's Wake is one of those damn books that it's just like you're supposed to pick up a copy of it.
Hmm.
You're supposed to like put it in the toilet, like in the bathroom, and
Yeah.
like pick through. You know what I mean? And pick through it. Maybe I will one day. I don't know. Is
And
there?
and then you go to one of your dinner parties with your intellectual friends that you have little reading competitions with, and you discuss it
Sure.
over wine and cheese.
Literally
Obviously.
just want to watch. I literally just want to watch teenagers, hit each other in football. That's what I want. That's all I want. This team of teenagers and 20 somethings is better than that team. Go Longhorns, hook 'em horns. Go Gophers. But yeah, no, I should do it. And actually, this is a legitimate call to listeners. If there is a way to engage with Finnegan's Wake that I don't know, is there like an annotated version? Is there a best version of Finnegan's Wake that I could get my mitts on? And if so, I will put it in the book club. I will
Is
put it
it
in the Art of Darkness book club for
is it some
patrons.
sort of special Irish code to get one over the English?
I think it might have a little bit of that, Abby, and I can get on board with that.
Me too.
That wee island. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but really, like, email artofdarkpod@gmail.com. If you have like an inside track on Finnegan's Wake, I'd be very curious. And of course, that's another perk for patrons is book club. We're going to have the great Aaron Gwynn on soon for book club, his new novel. And then before that, we're going to be doing Tower by friend of the pod, Jack from the book club from hell. And they're going to be joining us. Love those guys. Love that
They
podcast.
are lovely Australians.
They are there, and we've been on that show,
We
haven't
have,
we,
yes.
to promote
Hmm.
our radio play. I listen to every single thing they put out. I love that podcast. They're when they start talking about Bitcoin, they they go so hard, and you're like they're still talking about Bitcoin. Like an hour later, they're still talking about Bitcoin. It's fascinating. If you really want to get those guys wound up, get them talking about Bitcoin. But all right. So Marshall McLuhan is in Cambridge. All right. It not only refined his intellectual life, as you can about imagine, he landed where he belonged, but it deepened his spiritual journey, coming from this sort of uh, soft Protestant background. It was during this period that he began exploring Catholicism, inspired in part by the writings of G.K. Chesterton. The university's emphasis on rigorous thought and its exposure to a wide array of philosophical traditions allowed McLuhan to approach his conversion with both fervor and intellectual rigor.
Hmm.
So let's see here. I've got a little bit. When the spring term ended, McLuhan remained in Cambridge until the end of June 1935, meeting then with his Winnipeg friend Stuart Robb, a student at Oxford, and sailing from Harwich for Belgium. The objective of the continental excursion was to improve his French in preparation for the compulsory exam he would write the following spring. After 2 weeks in Brussels and Bruges, he was in Bruges, McLuhan continued, it's a good movie,
Hmm.
continued on to France and stayed with the Devon family in Boulogne-sur-Mer. The family boarded foreigners studying French. Here, McLuhan met a number of Americans, fellow students with whom he took 2 weeks of French classes. By the end of July, he was back in Cambridge and still preoccupied with mastering French, but spending more time immersed in Joyce and Hemingway than in Montaigne. Beginning his second year, McLuhan moved to rooms at Trinity Hall that gave him infinite content. Oh, sorry, infinite content.
Content.
I infinite content, infinite content. Yeah. Certainly, I have
Maybe a
no
bit of
right.
both.
No, maybe a bit of yeah, exactly. Certainly, I have no right to be as fortunate and happy, but shall probably have enough of thin times hereafter to level up, so that I shall die neither more nor less felicitous than common men. So he's like he's a pig in shit. He's so happy. Uh, in January of 1936, his Chesterton article appeared in the Dalhousie Review, challenging readers, even those critics who belittled Chesterton as nothing more than a showman, to recognize and understand the paradox that made him, in McLuhan's phrase, a practical mystic. The Chesterton who had for 30 years been examining current fashion and fatalism, who fears lest certain infinitely valuable things, such as the family and personal liberty, should perish, is evoked in McLuhan's opening paragraph and evokes the McLuhan who would do the same for another 30 years and more. He was deeply concerned that we were like losing our souls to technology. Like that's
Right.
the subtext of what he's talking about. And boy, I feel that. Wow, do I feel that?
Yeah.
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 Oof.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to be lying on your deathbed many, many years from now. You're not going to be thinking about all the time you spent on Twitter, I don't think.
No,
You know what I
all
mean?
the TikTok scrolled and the just
Yeah.
the sheer amount of time wasted. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like people obviously thought about that about television back in the day. Like my mother was like, "Stop sitting in front of that thing. It's rotting your brains." And
And look at you
I
now, Abby. You're a
consider
podcaster.
and now I'm a podcaster and aspiring to work in like television in a much more real way. But I, I, TV is almost intellectual now in comparison
Yeah,
to
you're right.
just the nonsense that we consume on a day-to-day basis.
Just garbage. It's just, and you
Absolute
know it
garbage.
is just
Mm.
hot garbage. And
And 90% of it is commercials. It's
right.
commercials dressed up as content.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And now like more and more AI is creeping in and you can
Hmm.
sort of see it creeping in and the boomers are getting one-shotted by this too on Facebook. They don't know what's real or what's not
No.
anymore. I mean, they never did. But I mean, that's we love our boomers. Mwah. Come on. It's not a hashtag not all boomers, okay?
Not
And
all
listen,
boomers.
you've if you're an Art of Darkness appreciator, and you must be if you've listened this far, you've not wasted a single minute listening to this podcast over the years. This is the most edifying media you're ever going to consume. We're so
We
earnest
read
and
actual
true.
books to bring you this
Right.
content.
That's right. Yeah, we actually did prepare. All right, so identifying Chesterton with the true mystics who reveal mysteries rather than hiding them, McLuhan again anticipates the basis of his own eventual approach to media in saying, the mysteries revealed by Mr. Chesterton are the daily miracles of sense and consciousness. The inexpressible value of existence that Chesterton found superior to any arguments for optimism or pessimism was transformed in McLuhan's work, beginning with The Mechanical Bride into the suspended judgment that so confounded and perplexed his commentators. Applying to Chesterton the words Jacques Maritain spoke of Arthur Rimbaud, the Eucharistic passion which he finds in the heart of life, McLuhan notes that Chesterton transcended poetry. McLuhan quotes Chesterton saying of one of his own literary creations that he had somehow made a giant stride from babyhood to manhood and missed that crisis in youth when most of us grow old. Words that McLuhan transfers to Chesterton himself. They're equally transferable to McLuhan. From his more than ordinary awareness and freshness of perception, McLuhan states, Chesterton derived his extraordinarily strong sense of fact, a sense that McLuhan too possessed and derived from the same source. All right, so he's a Chesterton stan. He's a big fan.
Mm.
He's writing about it, and this is the guy who would influence him to, ultimately to convert to Catholicism. Uh, so let's see here. He
Who else
converted
did he
in
influence? You were saying there were
Chesterton.
some. Yeah.
A lot of people. And we're going to talk about this on the After Dark. I'm going to give like a mini
Okay.
biography of him. He's one of these guys who still comes up on kind of like Tradcath Twitter.
Right.
He's still responsible for converting people. He must just have some really strong arguments for the credibility of and
Mm.
authenticity of the Catholic Church. And coming from somebody who's a wit and an Englishman and who speaks with that Anglo sensibility, that probably carries a lot of weight for a lot of people. Again, like I said, cuts so against the grain of what you would expect. Um, yeah, we're
Yeah,
going to
big
talk more.
enemy for the C of E.
Well, I mean, listen, on this podcast, Henry VIII is burning in hell. That's all I'm going to say. We'll talk more about Chet.
As a not religious person, I
Yeah.
agree.
Oh, great. Oh, good. Well, the show can go on. But I mean, he's you go to Chesterton's Wikipedia and it's like it's big like he's part of, conservatism in England, you know. He would debate with Shaw, H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell. He was like that guy, right? And yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Let's keep on keeping on. So he actually formally converted in 1937. Uh, and Chesterton was responsible for this. Here's what he would say. Chesterton's ability to synthesize faith and reason, presenting Catholicism as both spiritually profound and intellectually rigorous, resonated with McLuhan. I don't want to be resident, Mr. Catholic here, but
Hmm.
but I am going to do it. Do you, uh, what degree do you think most priests take? Catholic priests, Abby? Like formally, what do they study? before they go on
Uh,
and do theology.
Before theology, is it literature
They
or
get a degree in philosophy.
philosophy? Right.
Yeah, like, and so the vast majority of Catholic priests you're going to encounter are like the, more educated than the average person. It's a
Hmm.
deeply, deeply intellectual religion. If you want it to be, it's huge. It's over a
Right.
billion of us, right? And we're reproducing. Uh, rather famously. But I mean, really, it's like it's a huge church, and if you're moved by clacking beads and the Virgin Mary, that could be your
I guess
faith.
my big associations with it would be more rooted in art history, like the
Hmm.
Renaissance art. All of the big Renaissance artists were commissioned to do all of the religious
Of
iconography as
course.
beautiful artwork.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
the thing I say is that, the church is Western civilization. Like it is that thing. And, so my point is like there's a lot of anti-Catholic bias out there, some of it justified. It's been a mess at times, right?
hmm.
But there's a place for intellectuals in the Catholic Church. And it is actually kind of amazing when you come to the church with questions,
Hmm.
they've thought about it.
Right.
It's not like they don't there's not a lot of hand waving in the Catholic Church. Like if you buy into certain dogmatic tenets, then everything else follows from that.
Well, and I guess if
So
they've got philosophy degrees, they've considered other perspectives and
yes,
why you might be coming with those questions.
of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, our priest is a very smart guy. He went to Penn State, and Penn State is playing Notre Dame in the playoffs here. So I don't
Oh
know
gosh,
who
so
he's going to choose.
that's
It's
conflicting.
it's a house divided here. Shout out to Father Mark, wonderful priest, very wonderful man. All right, okay, so let's see here. Uh, in a letter to his mother, McLuhan credited Chesterton with helping him confront his own agnosticism, stating that Chesterton had prevented his despair from becoming a habit. His decision to convert was not without challenges. His mother, Elsie, was dismayed, fearing that
Mm,
Catholicism would limit his career opportunities and alienate him socially. And this is ironic because then he would get all these like teaching jobs, like
right.
at Catholic institutions. Like it's it's not a cult. Like it's a credible institution. You know what I mean? Yeah. Um, it was pretty funny. Yeah. Um, so in any event, McLuhan himself understood the gravity of his decision, knowing that Catholicism, particularly in academia, carried a stigma. It's a bunch of Marxists. Nevertheless, he moved forward, formally entering the church in 1937 after much prayer and contemplation. Based. Based. For McLuhan, Catholicism became more than a personal faith. It was an intellectual framework through which he interpreted the world. He was particularly drawn to the church's emphasis on the interconnectedness of human experience, the sacramental nature of reality, and the role of tradition in shaping culture, which, of course, are themes that we find in his work and his
Mm.
writing. Uh, and I'm going to be reading some of his work here in a little bit. McLuhan's faith also influenced his pedagogy, his teaching. He taught primarily at Catholic institutions, including St. Louis University and St. Michael's College in Toronto. He saw his role as not just imparting knowledge, but fostering a deeper awareness of the human condition. His Catholic worldview infused his critiques of modern media with a moral and spiritual dimension. And he frequently warned of the dehumanizing potential of unchecked technological advancement. Huge. That's like right where we are. We've got to hang on to that.
Yep.
We are in the thick of it. Um, and he was a daily mass goer. He would go to mass frequently. Uh, he became obsessed with the number three after his conversion too. He
Okay.
looked for it everywhere. I know it's kind of a little okay, and he would avoid the number 13, but he really, yeah. He described the Virgin Mary as a source of intellectual inspiration and saw the number three as central to understanding the structure of communication and perception.
Hmm.
So he was
Rule of
always looking
threes.
for the rules of, exactly. Yeah. He had a theory of media effects that he called the tetrad of media effects. Three different every medium has three different, that's how he broke it down.
Right.
So we'll talk more about that later.